Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins, and on tonight's episode, I'm going to be giving you the latest council report. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the recent things that the City Council has been looking at and actions taken by the council. And I'll be giving you all that information in just a moment, right after a brief message from our sponsor. And we're back. Thanks for watching. So once again, like I said, we're going to go over several things that the council has recently talked about and what's going on around the city. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the police station. As many of you guys know, there is a police station currently being built, and the city council already approved a budget of $20 million. Now, initially, two contractors put in the bid, and it came to about $23 million in order to do everything that the city wanted it to do. But due to budget cuts, etc., the city was only able to do a $20 million budget. So the contractors then reduced the size and scope of their plans and tried to make it work for $20 million. Well, initially the city was just going to go forward with this $20 million plan. But the problem is that under the $20 million plan, it would barely meet the requirements of today's police force and most certainly wouldn't meet the needs of tomorrow's police force. And so for that reason, it made sense to look at the $23 million option. But the problem is that we didn't have the money, or at least so we thought. And so with this hiring of the new city manager, he took to the task, looked into it, and was able to find the $3 million needed in order to make this happen. And the money was there in partially general fund and also partially in Measure P. And this money is specifically allocated for this purpose. And what this essentially does is now, instead of having to pay far more than $3 million in the future to add a renovation or to increase office space, etc. Now those things have more or less already built in and will save us even more money, millions of dollars down the road. A rather novel concept for the city of Los Banos to actually plan for the future and build things with the expectation of growth as opposed to building them for the current needs right now. And so already I have to say, from where I'm sitting, the current city manager, within about basically the first month of being here in office, has basically with this saved the city enough money in his future fund to essentially pay for his salary for life. Next, another thing that was talked about at the last meeting prior to this, the October 6th meeting, was the fact that the volunteer fire department is being restructured. So at that October 6th meeting, Fire Chief Hurley gave a presentation to the council, and essentially it outlines how they're restructuring the volunteer program. And they're looking at improving training, participation, and growth. This new plan is supposed to establish clear guidelines and policy, improve accountability, foster new membership and recruitment. And they're going to meet on the first Monday of each month. Third and fourth Monday will be dedicated to training, as well as one Saturday per month. And the training is going to be established by the fire chief. And active volunteers will meet a minimum of 110 hours of annual training and 24-hour shifts, either in the form of a full 24-hour shift or two 12-hour shifts in a given month. And lead volunteers of this organization and other volunteer department hands are going to be elected by members. And there's also support volunteers. So if you don't want to be directly like a firefighter and don the turnouts and SCBA, you can also still help in other roles and capacities or as a first responder. And these are referred to as support volunteers. And you can also apply as one of those as left. And as stated in the meeting, it seems as though the city is pretty low in volunteers. Currently, we have 17 members. And so if this is something you are interested in doing and something that you want to do, I highly would encourage that you reach out to the local fire department, as it seems as though they are looking for new volunteers. And finally, I talk again about the COVID-19 status update. Now, if you recall last video and last council report, I went over what Dr. Yu had said at the last meeting. This was much more brief. Instead, primarily what ended up coming up was Deborah Lewis talked about the city council ordinance regarding grocery cart and shopping cart sanitization and how it wasn't really being adhered to, and she wanted more clarification to the ordinance. But the reality is that the other council members felt like the ordinance was fine. It doesn't necessarily mean more clarification. It really just needs more enforcement. And the reality is Councilman Brett Jones brought up, is that it doesn't really matter how many rules you make or how clear you make those rules. If you don't enforce those rules, they really don't exist. And honestly, he's right. And in terms of enforcement, really what we would have is business license could be contingent on it. And also potentially there could be fines. But as of right now, there's really not any kind of hefty fine or anything like that. There really isn't much of a mechanism to enforce it. Like there's no check sheet. There's no really systemic going out and checking these places to see if they're sanitizing the carts. There really is nothing like that. Currently on the books, officially, the way that this is enforced is once a year, someone from the city goes out to the business and asks them to self-attestify, or in other words, promise that they did it and will do it. And so really it's largely based on the honor system. And so the direction from the council was that code enforcement should enforce this more aggressively. Initially, it seemed like most on the council were kind of apathetic to the idea and didn't really seem like they really wanted to waste or use much staff time or enforcement time on this. However, Deborah Lewis felt like this was an important issue as it's regarding citizen health. And Tom Faria was kind of neutral on this, and more or less at the end was like, yeah, I guess you have council direction, enforce it more aggressively, but we're not going to reword or restructure the order. Finally, as last two quick bullet points, the street naming policy by the city is starting to move forward. It was presented at the last meeting, and so they're starting to become a coherent plan of how to go about naming the streets as they come in. The process would essentially go through the economic development director, which in this case would be Stacy Souza Elms. And more or less the purpose is to make sure the street names are easy to say, pronounce, and more or less go with some kind of general theme related to Los Banos, like local residents have contributed a lot, or historical figures of Los Banos, or natural landmarks, things within the community, etc. So the idea is that now there will be coherent themes, not necessarily up to the developer, and instead more up to the city to dictate what these names potentially would be. As more information comes on this, I'll keep you up to date. So that's all for this City Council report. I hope you found this information informative and useful. It's a lot easier than sitting through 2.5 hours worth of meetings. You can have it all summed up in about 5 to 10 minutes. And you don't have to wait anymore on Facebook algorithm or Instagram newsfeed to get the news. Instead, you can go directly to lospanostalk.com and have it sent directly to your email. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.